some rhinos, horny as heck.
I'm just a giraffe once with a snack.
Hippity hop, I'm a kangaroo. How about that? Up and down with you.
I'm an elephant, I got junk in my trunk.
What the fuck am I
I'm
clown?
a wolf.
I'm a squirrel looking for my next.
Hi! Welcome everyone! My name is Perry Angela Simon Lapas and this is another lesson of SCI 521 Environmental Education and the People. Are you familiar with the term environmental ethics? Well, this is a branch of ethics or philosophies that establish the relation of human beings and the environment and how ethics play a role in this. Studying environmental ethics are a very important part of the world and are considered to be a functional part of human life. Therefore, it is essential that every human being to respect and honor these and use morals and ethics when dealing with these creatures. Environmental ethics has produced around environmental philosophy and is not asserted on people by any law or policy. It is rather a personal responsibility that should be developed to establish a stable balance between society, economy, and the environment. Now let's proceed with the role of human as part of nature. Environmental ethics believe that humans are a part of society as well as other living creatures. Humans are part of nature and must learn how to behave towards one another and interact with the environment. While non-humans are a very important part of the world and are considered to be a functional part of human life, therefore it is essential that every human being to respect and honor these and use morals and ethics with dealing with these creatures. It is the part of environmental philosophy which considers extending the traditional boundaries of ethics from solely including humans to including the non-human world. The concept combines scientific understanding with various philosophical aspects like human values, moral principles, and improved decision-making into conversation with science. The concept of environmental ethics was first popularized from Earth Day in April 24, 1970. And the scientific works of experts like Rachel Carson, who helped to develop environmental ethics in the US, and soon thereafter, the same ethics were developed in other countries including Canada and North America. Environmental ethics is important as humans should serve nature now. In current age, every natural resources is polluted, causing natural disasters. Humans became lazy using advanced technology and using up resources as much as they needed. To avoid future disasters, now we humans need to be more alert and work to save it. Plantation is the key factor as forest and greenery is depleting. If we start giving value to environment as our home, then it will also give so many natural conditions. Nature maintains homeostasis, which is supported by its elements. If we take away and pollute it, then equilibrium will break and disasters happen. Now, let's try to use the ethical principles and moral reasoning about the environment. There are many different principles on which to draw in making specific decisions in environmental ethics. But we will discuss only the three basic ones: justice, sufficiency, and solidarity, but then demonstrate how environmental concerns challenge us to extend these principles to include the well-being of the natural world and our human duties to it. These three ethical principles can be traced back to many different sources: Greek philosophy, religious teachings, and reflection on human experience. In the face of any decision involving environmental ethics, we should ask how each of these ethical principles, also known as ethical norms, can be applied to the situation at hand. Ethical principles are standards or benchmarks against which we can evaluate our actions. They are also signposts to orient us toward the difference between right and wrong, especially in conditions where there are multiple problems and the interest of more than one party. Let's have the first basic pair of principle: justice versus sustainability. The principle of justice states that equals should be treated equally unless there is sufficient reason to treat anyone or anything unequally. This principle is concerned with the inequitable access to environmental resources such as the clean food, air, and water, the injustice of greater pollution that often characterize lower-income communities, not wealthy suburbs. The notion of justice underlies concern about animal welfare, on the basis of what values are animals considered unequal to human and thus subject to consumptions by human. To apply principle of justice to an environmental decision, we should ask, are all human beings involved in this situation being treated equally? And if not, why not? And are all living creatures involved in this situation being treated equally? And if not, why not? Now, let's move on with the principle of sustainability. It can be defined as meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This explains that we as human beings are consuming or degrading many resources such as fossil fuel energy, topsoil, and water today faster than they can be naturally replenished, which means they will not be available to people in the future. The ethical principle of justice is at play because it underpins the need to equitably balance the needs of those alive today, the rich and the poor, with future generations. Therefore, environmental ethics takes the notion of fundamental fairness and stretches it to include those yet to be born. And now, to apply the principle of sustainability to an environmental decision, we should ask, what are the immediate and long-term effects of the problem before us? And who, humans and otherwise, is affected today by the problem before us, and who will likely to be affected by this problem in the future? Let's have the second basic pair of principle, sufficiency versus compassion. Upholding the norm of sufficiency makes demands upon individuals to share, to live more simply, and on human communities to ensure that everyone has access to the goods that they need to live a life of dignity. The ethical norm of sufficiency is closely tied to the notion of moral significance, which means that something is worthy of our ethical concern. This means that we include the needs of others in our consideration of what is important or worthy of our concern. Because when we consider the needs of others, such poor individuals in our society or poor countries in the world, we are asserting the moral principle of sufficiency. Only underlies the practice of having empathy. One good example is the community pantry that is started by Barangay Maginhawa and followed by the different barangays around the country. To apply the principle of sufficiency to an environmental decision, we should ask, will the decision permit all those involved, especially the poor, to have enough resources on which to live and flourish? And is there any aspect of the decision that indicates the presence of waste or excess? Let's ponder. Next, let's have compassion, extending sufficiency of the earth, which asserts that other living beings and elements are morally significant. The principle of compassion taught us that humans have responsibilities to act so that their needs are met too. Some environmental ethicists, such as the deep ecologists, assert that non-human forms of life have moral significance equivalent to humans. Most people, however, believe that other forms of life have some moral worth, but that humans are of greater moral significance. Even if you think animals are far more worthy of your concern than plants or elements, do recognize that all animals depend either directly or indirectly on plants for food, and that no creatures can live without sufficient clean water. To apply the principle of compassion to an environmental decision, we should ask, What duties do we have to other creatures likely to be affected by our actions? What does sufficiency mean for other creatures, especially those threatened with extinction? What would it mean to extend the principle of compassion to non-human creatures? And let's have the last basic pair of principle, solidarity versus participation. The principle of solidarity invites us to consider the how we relate to each other in community. It assumes that we recognize that we are a part of at least one family, our biological family, our local community, or our national community, then challenges us to consider the full range of relationships with others. In a globalizing economy, we participate in a vast international economic community, one in which goods and services provided for us by those on the other side of the world. Solidarity requires us to consider this kind of extended community and to act in such a way that reflects concern or the well-being of others. To apply the principle of solidarity to an environmental decision, we should ask, who are all the human stakeholders involved in this situation? Who are all the natural stakeholders? Is there a community of life or ecosystem involved? Are there any stakeholders, human and non-human, who are especially vulnerable? And the principle of participation, extending solidarity to make it practical, the demands of solidarity point us to the principle of participation so that those affected by environmental decision can shape how it is made. Many environmental problems stem from decisions being made by private individuals or companies that have wide-ranging implications. In some cases, in this country and others, governments make environmental decisions without fully securing the consent of the public. Often, those most affected are unaware of the decisions or the long-term effects on their health and the well-being of their environment. The ethical principle of participation requires us to recognize all the parties, human and non-human, likely to be affected by a decision, and to recognize that all parties should have a say in how the decision is made. Genuine participation requires transparency, meaning that each individual has access to the same information that everyone else has. To apply the principle of participation to an environmental decision, we should ask, do all the stakeholders in this decision actually have a say in how the decision is going to be made? And are there any stakeholders who cannot represent themselves or who have little power? How will their interests be represented in the decision-making process? With the rapid increase in the world's population, the consumption of natural resources has increased several times. This has degraded our planet's ability to provide the services we humans need. The consumption of resources is going at a faster rate than they can naturally replenish. Currently, environmental ethics has become the major concern for the mankind, and hence, the ethics are of prime importance for today's generation to have a clean, stable, and sustainable future. Therefore, it is important to study environmental ethics as it brings us closer and help us to understand the relationship. One of the importances of environmental ethics is to provide better quality living to current generation. Environmental ethics are a key feature of environmental studies that establishes a relationship between humans and the earth. Second, it protects the environment for future generation through regulated use of environment. With environmental ethics, you can ensure that you are doing your part to keep the environment safe and protected. Third, it will help spread awareness among people and thus protect the environment. The environmental ethics promote the increased use of clean and renewable sources of energy like wind, water, sunlight, and geothermal energy over non-renewable sources of energy like coal, petroleum, and which are major sources of environmental pollution. And lastly, it sustains other species as well as which is moral responsibility of one species. Successful environmental ethics involve the proper balance between ethics and decision making. The right questions need to be answered, the right way to develop, stabilize, and save the environment. Some questions regarding ethical decisions that human beings should answer with respect to the environment are the following. Should humans continue to clear-cut forests for the sake of human consumption? Remember Deputy Speaker and once again Party List Representative Rodante Marcoleta, who argues about the printing of module every quarter that will require millions of papers where the primary source are our trees. Try to answer this question to arrive in a morally right answer. Why should human continue to propagate its species and life itself? Are you familiar with the movie The Lorax? Where the people live in a place virtually devoid of nature, only artificial trees and such. The movie depicts the respect for the environment and all living creatures that will help us preserve the planet for ourselves and future generations. What environmental obligations do humans need to keep for future generations? If you ever watched the movie Elysium, which refers to the man-made PlayStation available only for rich people, because the planet Earth has been ravaged by disease, pollution, and overpopulation caused by human beings. So, if we don't change the way we think and the way we behave, what worse things can you think of that will happen to our planet? And last question. Is it right for humans to knowingly cause the extinction of a species for the convenience of humanity? If you are ever familiar with the movie What Happened to Monday, this shows the possible things that may happen in the near future where overpopulation and famine force government to undertake a drastic one-child policy. Imagine an overpopulated world where there will be a limited fossil fuels and global food shortage. What do you think will happen?